I'll try there's a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks I know. Not getting tired of talking, so I made up a show right now. It's time that you made your mind on. And looking sounds a little bit strange. Everybody is talking. You need someone ready to change. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay, 'cause it's the right time. I'm feeling alright. I'm flying higher. I'm ready to scream right now. Geeksvana. Don't miss any highlight. There's something you may like. Drums are ready to fly. I'll tell her to do it right, so I'll tell her to do it right. Geeksvana. We're feeling alright. We're flying higher. We're gonna win tonight. We're here just for the audience. We're gonna show what you're going through. We wanna find you the perfect drone. There's no one else who can help you out. It's time that you made your mind on. And looking sounds a little bit strange. Everybody is talking. You need someone ready to change. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay, 'cause it's the right time. I'm feeling alright. I'm flying higher. I'm ready to scream right now. Don't miss any highlight. There's something you may like. Drums are ready to fly. I'll tell her to do it right, so I'll tell her to do it right. It's better. We're feeling alright. We're flying higher. Gonna win tonight. It's better. It's better. It's better.
Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. I hope you're all extremely well on what is this Friday evening. I hope you've all had a fantastic week. Been out doing some flying, got some flying done today. Hasn't been the best of weeks for flying drones this week, I have to say, but hopefully there'll be some better weather next week as well, so that'll be good. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us on every time we go live, and I also want to say a big thank you to everybody for your support with the recent CAA interview series, in terms of engaging with that, in terms of getting your feedback across. We are told that it's read, all the comments and the feedback is read, so hopefully they have their spicy receptors on. What on earth are spicy receptors, Matt? In the background there, I'm not sure what that is, but yes, all of your feedback is read, all of your feedback does get passed back, etc. And that's what we're going to be talking about this evening with my colleague within the industry, Matt Williams, him of the Drone Mentor and UAVHUB, and we're going to be talking about not the interviews, well, we will be talking about the interviews themselves, but also actually about the community reaction to them, and really discussing that kind of thing, basically. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Matt to turn his speakers down very, very slightly before he comes on, because I can just hear myself so that means the audience will when he comes in, and I'll press this button. And hello, sir, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. I've been looking forward to seeing your sunny face this evening, and kicking back and chilling and chatting. But I think you've had quite a busy one today already, haven't you? In terms of being online and being interactive with the community.
Yeah, that's it. It's been a crazy week actually. Since I feel like since I've come back since the 1st of January, yeah, it's been really busy. But today, and I was just said hi to some of the guys in here. Like today, I've done a mentoring session for my kind of top tier training within the Drone Mentor, and I've seen 3 of them in here already, which is amazing. So I spoke to them for an hour and a half at lunchtime, and then we're here now chatting. So
you spoke to them for an hour and a half, and they've still showed up to hear more from you, basically.
That's it.
They're obviously
Yeah,
dedicated.
they've not quite had their fill today, stuffing them full of droney goodness.
No,
That's
indeed,
that's
indeed.
the thing, right?
Now we will be talking about this in a little bit, which is the one of Matt's newest projects, the Drone Mentor. So keep an ear out for that. It's an exciting one actually, and it's something very, very different, which is also different things are needed at the moment in the drone industry. So I certainly welcome that. But tonight we are going to be talking about the series, the interview series that's got all of us chatting to each other as well in the creator community just recently, and that is of course the Geeksvana interview series with the CAA, and I think it's been fairly enlightening, hasn't it?
It has. It's been really interesting. There's a few really interesting insights, I think, that have come out of it that certainly surprised me, and I'm sure surprised a lot of other people. Just certainly going through the comments,
Yes.
There were a couple of bits in there that were a little bit spicy, I think, but I think it was the comments that got more spicy than anything else.
I think so, and I think the fact that we've found out that there's probably quite a large part of the non-hobby user of drones, and perhaps the smaller drones, that didn't even realise VLOS was a thing, let alone that this was, that what's happened was a tweak of the VLOS guidance, etc. But so
it's a thing.
Yeah, VLOS. I can't fly my Mini 2 5 miles away. Hang on a minute. What's going on here?
You'll never catch on.
I'll
tell you what, though, I think the big thing for me, and sorry if I'm kind of stealing the thunder on this, the
it.
big one for me that came out of it, like, fair play to Callum for coming on and doing what he did, because my God, that's a brave move, dude. I don't know whether you're listening, but
yeah, exactly.
Gosh, yeah, it's
which is exactly my next point, and it's really to say that, because tonight we're going to be not critical, but we're going to certainly give our opinions on a few things, and obviously give the feedback of the community, which there has been a reasonable amount of criticism, but I really want to have that lineation and have that separation between the people and the organisation. We are directing this towards the CAA, towards having fairer skies, and I can guarantee you that everybody that I speak to at the CAA wants that debate. They have that just culture. They want to be held accountable for errors. They want to have the discussions. Hence, we're about to have a large public consultation as well. But yeah, I mean, I cannot thank Callum Holland enough, because in actual fact, the series, it wasn't really planned. This wasn't really something which was planned, bizarrely. We've been building up for a live Q&A with Mark Worry. So the idea was that it's sort of someone senior within the RPAS team at the CAA, or within RPAS, because it's not an RPAS team as such anymore, of course. A little bit sort of in reference to obviously the fact that we had the police on and that type of thing. So we've been planning that Q&A with them as well, because there were unanswered questions that obviously aren't the police's area, that would be more the CAA's area. We've been planning that for a while, but then of course these changes, the 722 update, AMC coming out, etc. So we decided to do it after that. And then there were the issues with 722 and that type of thing, and very kindly a shout out to Jonathan Nicholson as well, and Callum Holland, who very kindly wanted to actually get some answers in front of the community as early as possible, which meant we were actually putting some of these videos out before Christmas. But it wasn't planned that way. It was actually, I sat down with Callum, we talked about all of the issues, and it ended up being nearly 2 hours of recording. So I then decided, obviously, rather than putting a 2-hour interview out, we would cut that up into segments and topics, so people could dip in and out as they wanted. So, yeah, it wasn't something that was planned, but obviously has something that has certainly caught the attention of a good amount of the community. And as I say, I thank everybody for engaging with it, because I think it is important that we engage with everybody in the community, and we don't just sit here and talk to the people that's, I don't even know how to describe the different segments. And that's the thing, because you can have perfectly safe legal flyers who have a problem with some of the things that are happening at the moment, and you can have the renegades who don't have a problem with some of the things that are happening. So the drone community isn't really something you can segregate fairly easily. I suppose you could do it amongst niches of camera drones and FPVs, but even that line's become blurred these days. But yes, and as I say, there is, to me, there's a difference between not liking policy and that type of thing, but certainly still supporting some of the people that are working within that organisation, who are like Callum and Jonathan, etc., and the others that are working very, very hard to get the job done. And I feel like this interview series has started a discussion in perhaps a fairly unique way. I don't know if that's saying too much or claiming too much, and that I think we're starting to get voices heard, because we're starting to get interactions and that type of thing from different people within the industry who are thinking, actually, I didn't know people felt that way about this. I didn't know that happened, etc. And I think that discussion and that conversation is important to have, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's one of those, right? You are never going to please everybody, right? That's kind of that's the spice of life, right? Everyone is different. We all have different opinions, different viewpoints, different backgrounds that have got us to where we are, and I think we all think differently. And that, for me, is one of the interesting and exciting things about what I've always done and what I do now. But the big point is that ultimately, the regulations are in place for a very valid reason. This is why I started off my entire journey of teaching people. That's why over at UAVHUB we give away the training for free, because we want to educate as many people as possible and get them up to speed as best we can. That's why I used to do the Mr. MPW stuff, because these things are confusing. The concepts, and I think this is one of the big things that we as a community need to realize on the uncrewed side of things, but also we as a community on the manned aviation side of things. And, as someone who, I wouldn't say sits within the regulatory framework, because I very much don't, right? But I have some input into that, a very limited amount of input into that, it turns out. But, we are in a position where we are a stakeholder within that. And
an important stakeholder.
And all of a sudden we're in a place where you're trying to match people who aren't what we would class as traditional aviators with people who are aviators. And, we all speak with a different lexicon. We all use a different language. It's all totally different. It's a strange new world for all sides of the fence. And that's the big thing for me that's changed, particularly over the last probably 3 or 4 years, since DJI made it super easy for everyone to get in.
Absolutely.
And, and all of a sudden now there's a big regulatory problem and that's been actually caused by two things. And I don't know whether a lot of people realize this, but within the CAA, we were a member of EASA, European Aviation Safety Administration, and actually the regulation was done for us in the UK. The regulation itself was done in Europe. It was done in Brussels or wherever, and it's only since we've left the EU and we're now no longer a member state of EASA that the CAA have actually had to start regulating themselves. They were the UK's airspace regulator, but they were using regulations that were created by somebody else.
That's
and
right.
They were
agreed across all of those states at committees and where they were, the CAA were a stakeholder in the EASA rather than being the primary decision makers, weren't they?
Yeah, that's it. And so there's a big challenge, I think, that we need to realise as non-aviators potentially, or as the uncrewed community as it is now. We need to realise that they are facing a big challenge internally, as well as the external challenges that we're bringing to them, because we are non-aviators, many of us coming into an aviation world, and they've got to learn how to do it both ways. They've got to learn to regulate, but they've got to learn how to make that make sense to people who don't necessarily understand
100%.
the complexities and, like I say, the language that we use within the air navigation order and the legislation that supports it.
Yes.
So yeah, really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because
I don't envy them.
No, but we do need to find a way to make the regulation as accessible for and the guy leaving Argos with a DJI drone was brought up a few times by Callum in the interviews and was a reference point, almost like the average Joe in one of the US elections a couple of elections ago, and I think it is one of those things where we do need to ensure that everybody can understand the basics. And yes, there's follow the drone code and that type of thing, but I think it needs to go a bit deeper from that point of view and make sure everybody has a voice as well. But of course, I think as well, hopefully some of the work has happened from the point of view of being able to establish that there are more voices as well. So there is manned aviation, there is, the public. So the public's interest in drone use, etc., is going to be an important factor. And of course, we have good old, the world of future flight and AAM and the commercialization of drones and all that type of drone superhighways, etc. We've got all of that to come, but I think that's a good way down the distance. I just hope that we don't have. I hope we're not impacted now using our drones to help a something that might and will happen, but we don't actually know how that will form, because of course a lot of the technology for future flight doesn't exist yet, but which is exciting. But I hope we don't change things too much, as it were. From that point, I'm just going to cough very quickly.
Right. I think, and I know you don't like jumping into the chat necessarily whilst we're doing these conversations, but I'm going to, if that's okay, because there's a couple of interesting bits I've seen. It's gone up the screen now, but I saw Cold Cat putting in there about the fact that these regulations aren't required necessarily and they are overreaching. I don't disagree in a lot of cases. Bear in mind, I'm a model pilot first, right? That's how I got into aviation when I was a kid, when we used to take a model plane with a petrol engine, nitro engine, down to the field and fly it around, and no one cared, right? Because no one knew about them. And we did it safely, I think, and that's it. And I still think that is a way that we need to be encouraging people to get into aviation personally, because I couldn't afford to fly. My family couldn't afford for me to have flying lessons or anything like that. And, it was one of those things. So I agree. And if I'm honest, my personal opinion, the regulations are in some circumstances overreaching. But I think the once we are able to engage with the CAA and be able to have those frank conversations, like I say, not everyone's going to agree with the regulations ever. Some people are always going to think they're too lenient. Some people are always going to think that they're too harsh.
But that is where ultimately that is where discussion, that is where consultation, and I, especially in the last interview which we put out last night on the FPV side, I think I said the word consultation. You could almost have it as a drinking game, but it is something which I think we need to start seeing people engaging in more, basically, and I really hope, if nothing else, we'll see more of that in the future in terms of the community coming forward to actually engage and really take on these consultations, because it is very, very important. Now, one aspect I did want to touch on very quickly, and actually is one of the reasons why I invited you on as well, with all of your experience with Mr. MPW and all of the years you were very supportive to this channel when it was small as well, actually, which is also discussing, and I don't want to spend too much time on this particular topic, but my interview style is one of the things which has come up for comments, shall we say, in terms of, I think some people, a section of the audience would have liked to have seen much more of the sort of, I won't call it Jeremy Kyle, but perhaps the Kay Burley, more sort of aggressive style of, hey, that's not true, and that type of thing. And really, it's important to explain that my interview style is slightly different, from the point of view that if I invite somebody on the channel, I want to give them an option to put their view forward and get their information across, rather than it sounding like an MP being harassed over how much is a pint of milk, you're out of touch of reality, etc. That isn't really my style. But then you can see in the comments how people do react to what is said, and both positively and negatively throughout the series. And I think that gives also an opportunity for people who are pro what's happening and who are against what's happening to be able to hear the information, take it in impartially, hopefully, and then comment below with exactly what they feel. So it's been an interesting one, and most people have been constructive. We have had a few trolls, which is always interesting. My troll ratio has increased slightly, but again, I expect that when we have people like the police and the CAA on the channel. But I know that's obviously something which you've had an experience of when you were doing regulatory content, and it's something unfortunately we can't avoid.
Yeah. That's it. I think for me, it's one of those, right? There are different. It's interesting because I think if you I think the way, you know, we all have our own style of doing it. Actually, I think the way you went about it was probably the only way you were ever going to get someone who, from the regulator or represented the regulator. I know Callum wasn't necessarily representing them when he came on. He did it as himself off his own back, which is brilliant.
In the interviews, he was CAA, but the live show he was just himself because he wanted to come on and have a chat, which is cool.
Okay, cool. But I don't think you would have got that access, or you won't get access in the future if you'd gone at them, you know, as in a Kay Burley way or whatever. But that being said, that's why you've got Kay Burley on Breakfast, and some people watch that, and then some people go and watch Nagger and Charlie or whatever it is. You know, and I do think in a way that perhaps we are missing that in the industry. You know, I side of it when I did it, although I never got the interviews and stuff, probably because I was more on that side of it. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see that balance
exactly. But
within the industry.
And it is one of those things, you know, I've gone along the lines of registering as a journalist and putting the hours in to build up these contacts. And, you know, these things don't happen overnight, and you need to build trust. You need to build a reliable way for people to be able to get their message across. But then I do keep that message open to the scrutiny of the hobby and the drone community, the wider drone community, in terms of the comments and the feedback and that type of thing. And again, I will do my videos such as the one that we did saying the drone rules are broken, and you know, I will point out all of the issues that were there within Cap 722, etc. So I suppose it's one of those things where I kind of see a relevance to each section. But if someone's coming on the channel and, you know, I've asked them to come along and explain something, I want to give them space to explain it, basically. So I just wanted to touch on that, to be talking about things like the 722. Obviously, that's kind of where this all kicked off, as it were, when 722 came out, and we were already having obviously some issues in terms of C labels, but I think most of us knew in the know, as it were, that actually C labels weren't going to be able to be used. Hence, I put my video out before the announcement saying it would be irresponsible of me to say go and buy the Mavic 3 Classic, because actually I don't think we're going to be able to use it here in the UK. And sure enough, that did come to pass. But it was a strange situation to be hosting a channel that talks about the sort of regulation side of things and gives people advice on how to follow regulation, and hopefully, you know, keeping it safe so that we can protect the hobby in the future. But yet we were presented with a document with a lot of inconsistencies and, you know, go further than inconsistency, errors, where it felt like almost, you know, paragraph to paragraph hadn't been read in context with each other, that literally there was a cut and paste job, and then, okay, we'll publish that. Am I being too harsh in describing it like that?
I don't think so. I think that's, you know, there were, as we know, there were many discrepancies. Callum came on and admitted that. The CAA have talked about it. I mean, it was one of those things that the 722 in particular was withdrawn, or not withdrawn, but it was updated very quickly just before Christmas. And, you know, quite rightly, it's one of those things that I've always pointed the 722 out to people over the years and said, actually, it's quite a good document. Like when you're on days that you can't go out and fly and the weather's too bad, whatever it may be, it's a good way to start to get your head around the spirit of the regulations and actually, if I'm honest, how you could operate a bit more freely, I think, in a lot of cases than people, particularly at the start of the industry, were taught or thought that we were able to do. Because it is all interpretation, right? But and that's been so yeah. So I quite like those documents because it gives you something to hang your hat on. It gives you something to fall back on. And I've always thought of using those more to say, well, no, hang on. Actually, I feel as though, according to X, Y, and Z, I'm doing things properly. And that for me is why it's always been so important for people to understand the regulations properly, because only when you understand them properly, I think, can you then push them to the to the limits, if that makes sense. And I was very much the same in my military flying career. I used to do lots of things, particularly in the low flying system, which fellow operators perhaps weren't as comfortable doing. And I would, I was an instructor, right? And I would take people out and do some of those things, and they'd be like, Jesus, are you sure we can do this? I'm like, yep, because if you understand the regulations and take the time to read, as we had at the time, the MODs, the military aviation, the document set that we had, if you took the time to understand it, actually, you could take civilians flying at low level and show them what it's like at 50 feet, battering along the countryside in formation, because you are allowed to do it. You just have to get sign off from the station commander. And all you have to do is say that it's in the service interest. And you can sign it off, and people all the time are like, oh, no, you can't take civilians flying at low level. No, you can only take off and fly above 2,000 feet and come back again. I'm like, absolutely not. No, because those are the people who need to know this and they need to see what we do and how fucking tough it is when it's 35 degrees outside and you're in your body armor and you're battering along in formation for, 4 or 5 hours at a time. And they need to see this. They need to come out sweating and throwing up and all that sort of stuff, because
exactly,
that's the reality of it, not taking off and everything's cool. And so yeah, for me, that's it. And but on the other side of the coin, that means that those documents need to be correct.
Exactly, 100%.
Because people are relying on them,
and you shouldn't be able to go from one paragraph to another, and see literally inconsistent, actually being told the opposite. You can fly 500 gram over someone with an A2C. So, oh, actually, no, you can't. And that's really, and exactly what you're saying there is really what was annoying me from the point of view, and it was annoying me. I was angry about it from the point of view that people who were being extremely diligent, following the rules, watching all the videos, taking it all in, operating their drone carefully, doing things perhaps that they felt like, okay, I feel that this is a bit over the top, but it's in the rules. So actually it's in the guidance. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be careful here. And then they feel like with things like the VLOS, things like 722 errors and that type of thing, that they felt a little bit slapped in the face, which I can understand, because combined with unpopular things like the VLOS definition, errors in the 722 can strain the relationship with the community. And then we do start to see, I started to see in that VLOS video, I started to see lots of comments of, I'm done with the rules. And obviously that's probably literally the opposite mission that I have in terms of, wanting to see the hobby protected as we move forward. But it is difficult. But I also have to caveat my anger with the fact that they did respond. They did change the 722. They are currently changing other documents like 722H, etc., and that type of thing. They did come on air. They did clarify what they meant by the VLOS, and we found out, yes, they really did mean what we thought they meant, which wasn't much fun for too many people. But yeah, so there at least there was the reaction as well. And that's one of the things I noticed a little bit further up in the chat. We had, I think it was one of your chaps actually mentioning that, but do they listen? I think it might have been KC. And in actual fact, you'd be surprised how much they do listen. And I think the consultation on the legacy side of things, to me, showed actually that potentially that's how you handle consultations. That's how you handle talking to the drone community from the CAA, because it was simple, it was accessible, people understood what they were saying and what they were asking for. They didn't realize the impact it was going to have on sea labels perhaps, but they at least realized what it was about, and therefore they got lots of response, and they came back and said, look, you're all on very much on the same wavelength, etc., so we're doing this and this is what we're recommending. They snuck the open investigation in the back there as well, as a recommendation to the DFT. But yeah, so I feel that that's sort of in abject difference to something like the AMC consultation, which you did need to have three, almost, I said to Callum, you had to have 3 monitors open and print 100 pages off beside you and that type of thing. And it felt like a more complex thing to do. And as you were saying at the beginning of this stream, I think we need to find a way to engage everybody fairly and allow everybody, even the occasional hobbyist with the sub 250 gram drone. Okay, they're not going to have as much interest in it either, but everybody should be able to access this kind of consultation, etc.
Yeah, I think there's a few interesting points right out of that. So first of all, it's one of those where people say that they want their voice to be heard, but then when there is an opportunity or there is a call to action from people within the community, we see not a huge amount of action generally. It's the same people a lot of the time who do put themselves forward. And, you know, and I'll go back to this. The very first video I did on the Mr. MPW channel after the crappy intro video that I did, right? You got to start somewhere. The very first video I did was an open letter to the then Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling. And I tried to get people within the community to, you know, realize that they were going to bring in a registration that was going to be paid for. And no one listened to me, and it was so frustrating at the time. So I did this open letter, and I put a Freedom of Information request in because I put the contact details in there and all that sort of stuff. I said, please write to your MP, or write to the Transport Secretary. This is his email address. Send it in. And I put a Freedom of Information request in, and not one person wrote in or said anything. And then when it came out that it was going to be, I think it was 19 quid a year or something, they said at first that it was going to be.
That's right.
And I was like, look, this is way too much money. You're just going to stop people entering the hobby and the industry, and people aren't going to realize about it anyway. So, you're going to have to do something about it. And actually, in the end, I think we were instrumental in our voices being heard and getting that price down in the early stages, But I think if we'd all pushed hard enough, we would have ended up in a place where we wouldn't have done that at all. We wouldn't have had to do that at all, because I genuinely feel as though we are the people that have the power, and it is up to us to decide, or to at least try and influence. And this is one of those big things, right? Like I say to people all the time outside the aviation community. At the end of the day, like I don't like it. I can't stand it when people complain about things but don't actually do anything through the right channels to try and change things. And that's why I got so frustrated with the CAA back in the day, because I was trying to go through the correct channels to make things happen and to affect change and to get us as a community listened to and to get the CAA communicating backwards and forwards. And I got reprimanded for doing that, because in the end I got so frustrated that I came on your channel and said something. I don't know. I've got the timestamp somewhere on a letter from the CAA.
It is still live
and I
somewhere.
They didn't like, and they, they stopped me from doing what I was doing and trying to help people. But that's what I think about it. And again, that comes from me with a flight safety background, ultimately, of looking after my friends and colleagues who are flying at low level still. My best friend Joe is a Typhoon instructor over at Coningsby. He's battering around all day at low level. Well, probably most of the day at 40,000 feet, because that's what those Typhoon boys tend to do, right? They don't do much, just
indeed
smoke cigars and drink whiskey and have tea and stickies at 4 o'clock.
Can I just say on the rare thing that they're actually watching, this is Mr. MPW Matt Williams, the Drone Mentor's opinion only, and I think you do thoroughly great work and are extremely busy all day long.
Nah, fast jet mates, mate. They just live in hotels and have
basically,
all the women. But it's so that's why this is so important, right? That we get the CAA to engage, and that we engage with them. And if you don't like something, then we need to be going to the CAA or to your MP or whatever, because they have to do something about it. And that trail now is fully auditable. You might feel like you're not being listened to. You might feel like nothing's happening, but they have to do something. And if they don't, if you put a Freedom of Information request in and your MP has done nothing, then it's on you to get them to change or to do something about it. So that's kind of my frustration with that side of things. But like I say, a lot of it is down to that two-way communications. And I think one of the big things about people feeling as though they're not listened to, and this again comes back to us needing an industry voice, I think, is that the CAA traditionally are used to, airline pilots don't bitch and moan to the CAA if they don't like something. They go to their company, or they go to their union, or they go to BALPA. All right, the British Airline Pilots Association. They have a focal point who has a direct connection to the CAA at the very highest levels, and the DFT, and to Parliament, and they can affect change. We don't have that representation within the drone industry at the moment. But even the unmanned industry, it's not just the hobby users and commercial users, it's the uncrewed full stop. We don't have that yet.
No, exactly, and I think that's where some of the frustration comes in terms of perhaps when we do get the trolls and when we do get the negative reaction from the audience as well to things like the interviews and that type of thing, is that because they want to see, they're frustrated, they're like, well, hang on, why is nothing being done about these things that we're really unhappy about? Why is this not being put forward? Why is that not being put forward? When actually that isn't the job of Geeksvana. The job of news outlets, I suppose, like Geeksvana, is really to get that conversation going. And actually now the audience know what the CAA are thinking. You know, we have it on record. We have them on record saying exactly what they think about different things. There's no misinterpretation about what they think, how they interpret VLOS or anything else like that. We have that, and now that needs to be, as you say, we need that middle ground. And what I found frustrating more than anything else within the unmanned sector, particularly uncrewed sector, whatever you want to call it, is the lack of that type of body and the lack of that kind of power, as it were, to wield as a single sword, as it were, because we do have a lot of bodies, and I'm a member of BMFA, I'm a member of FPV UK, we've got RPAS UK, we've got XYZ, but I don't really see any of them engaging and challenging government or the regulator in perhaps the way that, as you say, we do have in other sectors of aviation. And I agree with you. I think we missed that. How we reach that, I don't know, because that is, you know, we spoke about that in the live stream when you were on last, about how we get that representation, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do, but it is definitely something we're lacking. In the absence of that, we need to make sure as a community, we engage with things like these videos. One, because obviously I like the clicks and the comments, thank you very much. But also because with the consultations particularly, your information is going on record. And if they have 30,000 people telling them the same thing, and that thing is safe, and you cannot deny that, etc., then they know they have a problem and that they are regulating against the community rather than with. They're not bringing you with them, and I genuinely think we might see, you know, something different there. But with although I agree that we need that, I don't think we're going to get it, and because I think once you get to a certain size, it becomes about protecting that organisation more than even you know, being that outright, but that outspoken voice, rather than, you know, being hit down as a nail head sticking out. And people don't want that, especially when they have built large organisations. But therefore, I think we need to be the voice ourselves, and we need to engage with these things. Now, Mopax was asking why the DFT involved, and I think it's just worth just because actually this is a political thing. This isn't just a let's you know, stand on the street corner shaking our fists at the CAA saying grrr. The CAA are the airspace regulator who are commissioned by government to you know, for a safe airspace, etc. The DFT are the government department above them, so they are, you know, the civil service and the politicians that give that the general direction, give them their instructions and that type of thing as well. In fact, the DFT are actually running a review into the CAA and how they operate at the moment, which is also through a public consultation, which I think might be just about to close or just closed.
19th of January, I think it closes. There
you go. Thank you. So actually this is, and as Matt was saying before about going to your local MP and talking to them about it, that is actually important, and that is actually a route into engaging with this kind of thing as an individual member of the public, as an individual member of the hobby community, of the drone community, and it is a very important one. But yes, the DFT are very much involved, as the I was going to say the dark overlords of the but I mean I mean that in jest entirely, of course.
You're going to get a letter through if you carry
right?
on with that kind of language.
You know, yeah, I suppose, yes, indeed. I'll be. No, I won't be. Okay. Now, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning, which was a surprise to me, but then this is also one of the reasons why I present my content in a fairly neutral manner, is actually that initial VLOS video that I put out that's now had 80,000 views or something. I didn't expect that to get more than a couple of thousand views, even months later. I just expected to be, okay, they've updated the VLOS rules, let's carry on. But the response, the drone community response to that, and then obviously hot off the back of it, the errors and things in 722 and the confusion over 722H, etc. this really was a catalyst. The new VLOS thing was a real catalyst, wasn't it? In terms of how the community felt about drones. Obviously, there's that section that just didn't realise VLOS was a thing, and I'm glad we've reached them. And VLOS is a thing. VLOS is about safety. We can't just be flying our drones off 5 miles away. It's not practical to be going into consultations and asking for that. I don't think if we had 1 million people asking for that, I don't think it would happen. But it was an interesting reaction to it, and I think that when you, as I say, I think the section that got me a little bit upset is when I saw what I view as regular viewers who are long-term, who have therefore watched a lot of my videos. I know their names from the comments, etc. These are guys that try to keep up with the rules, and they did just feel like they were slapped in the face a little bit by being told they have to keep their Mini 2, Mini 3 so close that you have to know the orientation. And but although you can use telemetry and lights, that type of thing, but you have to have the backup of knowing where the craft is itself. I think it was an interesting reaction, wasn't it? A passionate reaction.
Very passionate reaction, yeah, which was to be expected, right? Because it's a passionate community. Like, we all enjoy what we do, and I think we all love what we do. That's why we do it. But yeah, and again, this is the other thing, right? Though, that everyone, I think, and this is for me, this is the thing about going in and reading the rules and regulations and the actual legislation that you're going to be enforced against if anything was to happen, against what someone from the CAA is interpreting it as, or what they're, because for me, I know which way round my drone is pointing. I know which way round my model aircraft or model helicopter in the past has been facing. When it's a lot further away, then people might think, well, you can't see that for the purposes of orientating it. I'm like, well, actually, yeah, I can, because I have that concept in my mind and in my head, in my hands, because I've done it for so long and I do it so regularly. I'm so current with it. And this is the difference between, currency and competency and just going out and flying.
Yes.
Like, I could get a Mini 3 further away than probably some people might feel comfortable with within the current BV or VLOS requirements. That's up to me to justify in court because of my experience and my capability and the time I've been flying. That's up to me to justify. It's up to you to justify. If you feel like you can, then you can. Yeah. Like, who's to say that you can't? And until it's tested, until it's tried in court and they come up, and I think that's why the 500-meter thing existed originally, right?
Yes.
Because it was a hard line,
and of course that was before we had the small drones as well, so that 500 meters was a fairly, so I think that did need updating in some way, but you're absolutely right, because I think what frustrated me was the AMC feels so restrictive in terms of VLOS, but actually you can be flying outside of the AMC and still be perfectly legal. We have a VLOS survival guide coming out next week where I'm going to explain to the audience exactly the differences and the comfort the AMC can give you. So perhaps if you are a beginner flyer, then actually flying within the AMC 100% might just give you a bit of confidence in your first hours. As Matt was saying, he's an extremely experienced pilot. Of course, none of this means that we can use, as Luke Smith is saying, Matt uses spidey senses. And none of this means that you can use your spidey senses, and that there is still legislation there. So you do genuinely need to keep VLOS. But actually, how you decide on that is down to you in terms of, as you say, you standing in court to defend yourself and whether or not you can do that. Flying under the AMC gives you the presumption that you're flying, but even that I find a strange thing to say out loud, because saying, oh, I was flying within the AMC, you've then got to prove that you were flying within the AMC, which I suppose if your drone only crashes 90 meters away from you, then you're probably okay. But to me, it's a strange thing. And when we talk about court and things being tested, of course, we're not going to see people arrested for flying outside of the AMC VLOS guide. That isn't going to happen. You will find people flying outside VLOS, like the chap who's just pleaded guilty, who was charged as with the Hurricane for the VLOS thing. So you will find it happening on legislation, and perhaps now that's happened the first time with a guilty plea, we might see more. Who knows? But yeah, it's an interesting one, because we're here talking about rules, but actually there is still that nuance to aviation that people need to get, that they need to understand in terms of things being tested in court, but also things not necessarily being the enforcement bleeding edge, as it were. You know, the enforcement bleeding edge is your drone within visual line of sight. I doubt very sincerely whether you're going to have police forces up and down the country saying to their officers, right, you now need to make sure that they can see the orientation, because they're not going to get in an argument at the side of the road as to whether or not you can see the orientation, because what you can see to what they can see it, and you know, you start to get in a whole catch-22 there. So it really is something which is going to provide the backup in court. And as we've said before on the previous live stream, that, you know, certainly when you're in court, if the judge wants to find out, okay, well, what is an acceptable means of compliance legislation, they will refer to the CAA. But even then, it's not saying that you are, you know, breaking the law by flying outside of it.
And sorry, mate, it's an interesting point as well. Like I say, for me, that comes down to understanding what exactly the wording which is in there, right?
Exactly.
And the spirit and the intent of it. But you made something that I think is worth picking up on that you just said. You said it's up to you to prove, you know, if you went to court, that you were in visual line of sight. And as far as I understand it, it's the opposite. It's for the prosecution to prove. I meant if you were relying on AMC, if I was to go to court and say I would like the presumption that I was flying legally and flying under AMC, you kind of switch things around then by saying, actually, now I've got to prove I was flying within AMC, which how do you do? You know, as difficult as it would be for someone to prove that you're flying out of the AMC for VLOS, it would be difficult for me to prove. So, but yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. But I was more saying it's a weird one with the AMC, because it does switch round. That I almost feel like I'm proving, which shouldn't be the case, but that's the way round I feel like it starts to go, which is a. And I still think we need some proper communication and guidance from the CAA on that AMC GM piece as well. And I mentioned this to them last week directly. I was lucky enough to get a meeting with them about a few things, and this was one of the points I raised. Where, you know, the AMC GM is one of those things. It's like, well, they've brought out this document, and again, I think it's a really good document to bridge that gap between aviation and non-aviation potentially, although it is, ironically, it's a document that came out of effectively EASA from an aviation point of view. But where does that sit? And this is one of the things I think that they need to make clearer in terms of communication, is where things sit and what it is that you need to ultimately understand and know where things need to be. There you go, right? Point proven. What is the AMC GM? And like I said, I asked the question facetiously last week, because I think I discussed with you. I won't go into it here necessarily, but it's one of those where it's like, what is that and where does it sit? And we need to have this communication, and that fundamentally, I think, is the big thing that, as a community, we need to be requesting from the regulator, and the regulator need to realise that they need to do more of, and they need to do it better. They need to be saying, right, this is it, really simply broken down. And, you know, you did a great job, albeit the trolls and stuff jumping in, and, you know, people, I can see them. People, and we get this all the time, right? Where it's like, well, of course, someone who's got a vested interest in there being rules and regulations would say that they want more rules and regulations. Like, no. And this is why, Geeksvana exclusive, I'm looking to exit the regulated space, right, very soon, because that way I can be that truly independent voice, and I don't have to. Well, I don't care about what the CAA say and think and try and do to me, right? Generally, I just
have you ever cared? Hence, you got in trouble in the first place. But yeah,
as it was, had to shut up.
No. Actually, I would put it the opposite way. I think that actually you care about the space, and you care about, you know, you are somebody who has genuinely built up a relationship with thousands of people who fly drones at every level, and I think actually it's because you do care. I wouldn't say that it isn't that you don't care what the CAA think. I would more say it's actually you care about what's happening with the community.
That's it.
So I'm just being so soppy for a minute there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but that's it, right? Like I am passionate about aviation and people getting into it, and that's why we need to make sure that everyone understands it and that they understand the rules and regulations, and that's why the training that we try and deliver is as good as we can make it, and it's free, guys. It's absolutely free for anyone in the UK. I teach the rules and regulations for free. I don't want any money off people. Like, we cover the bills, and that is genuinely it. We could have made a fortune, but we haven't, because I'm trying to teach people and educate people, because the more education we can get out there, the longer we can make this gap between the here and now and an accident or an incident that ends it for everybody.
Yeah.
And the way we get around that is quite exactly what is it? Firefly UAV.
Yes.
We don't need more regulations. We need better training, and that is 100%.
We need better safety, and this is one of the things actually. It's one of the reasons why I pulled Firefly up, and I've said this before on streams where Bruce Simpson XJet has been on as well, obviously, who has a rounded sort of RC background as well, which I know you do as well, but I don't. And I talk about the fact that I'm a member of a BMFA club, and it's a physical club, so we meet at a field, and there can be different people. There's dozens of people and members, and we have little shelters to put our drones together, and we have pits where we can sit and get things ready. Then we have little helipads that we can go and fly from, and it's intended as a heli club, but they're very kindly one of the few that are very open and welcoming to drones, and they taught me an awful lot. And I feel like I know a lot of safety from being in that club. I know about what to switch on first, and really what to look for in damage terms, and what can happen and what can go wrong, and stay calm in a flyaway, and do this and do that, and X, Y, Z. Ironically, I learned all of that from the fellow BMFA members who have been flying 20, 30 years. None of that I learned from the CAA. And in fact, one of the reasons why Geeksvana has become a journalistic outpouring for me and has become a news-focused channel is because I wanted to get the answers for myself, basically, and I didn't feel the answers were out there. I felt that reading the documentation, you still didn't really get a full indication of how to practically make that happen. So I completely agree with what Firefly is saying there, that we need better training, and we need, and I would say that training didn't necessarily need to be, go and take 5 more certificates. This isn't Matt Williams trying to sell UAV hub courses. He's sold enough of those. But it's actually more, we need more training in terms of people knowing what they're doing in a safety point of view. I was always shocked in the old days, in my very first year of the channel with the PIFCOs. And I would have PIFCOs email me and say, I've gone through my course, I've done this, I've done that. I'm still really unsure what to do. I'm still unsure how to engage on a flight and that type of thing. There was never a UAV hub person, I would like to say that as well, though. But yes, we do need more of that. Also, just to answer Coolcat's frustration there about what is this an acronym? The AMC is the AMCGM, which is the Acceptable Means of Compliance and General and Guidance Material. And essentially it is the CAA putting in, and I don't want to use the word legal because although it goes through consultation, it becomes their legal definition. It's not the law. It is guidance material from the point of view that it tells you how they feel. If you want to come to them and say, I want to comply with the legislation and the regulations, that's how they feel. It's acceptable means of compliance. So keeping your drone so close that you can see the orientation, etc. So yes, and it sits, as Matt says, in terms of we need to work out where it sits, but it sits somewhere down between 722 and the implementing regulations in terms of the weight that it carries. So yes, so it's something I think this conversation, and I did see XJet earlier in the chat put something like 2023 is the year of the pushback. I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's a pushback this year, but I think here in the UK, it's got to be the year of the communication. It's got to be the year of, now we've started this communication line. Now we've started this. And, I'm not just about Geeksvana. I want to see the CAA communicating in as many public forums as they possibly can. And, I want to see things like where Callum was talking about, getting some of the policy team out flying drones and out with FPVs and understanding it a little bit more. I want to see that. And I think it would be good for that to be seen as happening as well. And we also need to ensure that the community as a whole start engaging with the consultations. We had the consultation that we've put up in on our community tab, which is the CAA charges going up, which means that the operator ID will increase. It's just gone up from £9 to £10. It will then go up to £12 in April, I think it is. And there's a sort of in a sudden sort of uproar in the comments to that post about that. And actually that consultation has been going on a while. I have spoken about it a couple of times, and I know there's fatigue. I know it's difficult, but we do need to I wouldn't call it pushback. I would call it, this is the consultation year. This is the year we start answering all of these consultations and actually getting our voice across. And if we're then not listened to and what we're asking for and what we're saying is reasonable, then we've got a position where we can start holding these people to account and saying, why not? Why, if you've got, no safety fears, no safety issues, and you're being guided by the users, the very stakeholders that who are being reasonable as well. As I say, not saying we want to fly our minis 3 miles away, but they're being reasonable in what they want. Now there will be an accountability, because they won't be able to claim that they don't know what we want, etc. That was a rant. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I've seen for me. So yeah, three bits I've just thought of. The first one is that I think that it shouldn't be down to me doing the Mr. MPW stuff like I used to do. It shouldn't be you doing managing to get the CAA onto your channel for the messaging to get out there to the community and to the industry, or vice versa, for us to be a portal for the CAA to receive feedback. Like, actually, when you think about it, the very fact that the CAA have been on your channel and used it as a way to get information out there, from the sounds of it, the way that they're then using the comments as feedback, that shouldn't be happening. There should be, particularly with the size of this problem, right? Because I believe that it has become a problem now, effectively, for them, because there are so many of us who have paid and joined and are invested in this now and are interested in it. That's probably why they're inundated, because there's 300,000 or whatever people now who, I've paid my 10 quid, I want my say. And that's cool. That's why we need this focal point. But they need to be doing this. They need to have a YouTube channel, if that's the direction they want to go down, and be doing videos. They need to, we've got a podcast, we do Skywise. Well, podcast, okay, cool. That's awesome, potentially for a certain demographic.
It's not interactive enough, is it, either?
No,
and then you look at their YouTube channel and the comments are switched off, which I understand. You've then got to employ someone, you've then got to have a policy on what's allowed in the comments, and there's work. But actually, it's engagement, and engagement is a key part of the job. So actually, I think it's worth investing time in and opening the comments up and having discussions with people. To be fair, the FAA do it. Their live streams, their live chats are open, and people are able to. And there is an FAA channel.
Did it a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, exactly.
EASA had, on a Saturday, they had the entire team in, and like I say, I'm not saying that this is something that the CAA could do right now.
We're not trying to take their weekends away from them either. But
that's it. I don't think they've got the resource, to be honest, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, and that's one of the points I raised with them last week at the meeting. Like, if you are that under-resourced that you can't engage with the community potentially how you might like to, let us, as the electorate, speak to our MPs, push the DFT, whatever buttons we can push. Because I said, ironically, we probably have more power in that respect than you guys saying we need a bigger budget, we need a bigger budget, we need a bigger budget. Because actually then there's 300,000 of us that can turn around and go, they need a bigger budget. And I don't know, that for me seems to make more sense. So there's that side of things, that communication piece. I just saw as well that Adam Smith, actually, I just saw, didn't realise Skywise existed until Sean mentioned it. And that's part of the problem, right? Why are these things not being taught? Why is that not in the box? That kind of thing. And it was an Adam Smith one that I saw further up. I can't remember what he said now. There was another comment from Adam Smith that I was going to reply to. It was his one further up. Not that one. No. I don't know where it's gone now. Sorry, that's the only thing, isn't it? When the
Skywise thing is something which is so important, and to me, in the interviews I said to Callum, why don't you just have a box? And I understand they have to be careful with the operator ID when you register there's GDPR, there's all sorts of other things, you're only registering for that, but just have a little tick box that says I also would like to update and have all Skywise updates for all drones, and then through on my email I get all these changes that happen, all the other updates, I get TFRs sent through to me, etc., or temporary zones, etc., that type of thing, and also updates like the one that came out today to say with the airspace changes and things, and the public consultation, that's the way to drive that more. And I feel like, and this is again not a criticism of the people necessarily, but I feel like public organisations have these things to tick boxes, right? We have Skywise. So now they can tell the DFT, now they can tell people, we have all these different forms of actually reaching people, but they're not checking if they're actually reaching people. They're not actually following through and seeing actually if they can. Was it that one?
It was, yeah.
Excellent.
That was the one. Yeah, so and I saw that pop up, and I was like, no, I totally agree. I think that the regulations in a lot of areas now are overreaching. Like I remember when, and it was a different world, right? When we had the two articles within the air navigation order, Article 166 and 167 back in the day, and that was what you could and or couldn't do with a drone before
Yes.
722 and stuff really existed. And you know what? It worked. Like we were out there with equipment that was very unreliable, shall we say. So a lot more risk, I think. We were doing stuff with it. It was heavier. All of it was heavier because to get a 1080 camera in the air, you were
Absolutely.
flying a 12, 15 kilo rig,
Mm.
and it would fly for a few minutes. You know, the batteries on those things were heavier than the entire flight box that you would take out.
There was a lot more of
this.
this as well, wasn't there?
Big time, yeah, big time. And yeah, so I personally think it's way too complicated now, way too complicated. And I get that we're setting ourselves up for the future, but this was the original intent of the open, specific, and certified categories. And for those who, and I know I've seen Impact Aerial, right? Nigel Pugh from Impact Aerial, who was one of my very first students to come through the training back in the day in Oxford.
Awesome.
And a long time ago, right? And at the time, it was one of those where, oh God, I've lost my thread. What was I saying? Bollocks.
It happens.
Sorry.
I do have one of his comments here, but yes.
Yeah, it was one of those where, you know, we had these things in place and we operated safely within them, and funny old thing, everything worked, and sorry, that's what I was going to. The three categories, right? Open, specific, and certified. We knew that these were coming from 2015. I went to a meeting in Montreal with ICAO back in the day because we were a key stakeholder, right? Well, not now. But because we were one of the first into the space, I was at those meetings, and the same with JARIS over in EASA. And most people probably never heard of JARIS, but we used to teach it to people like Nigel when they came through the course, because this happened in 2015. And that's when all these things were like the notice of proposed amendments and things like that went in.
Yes.
And it was designed, and I understand that things have changed. They never expected a 249 gram drone to pop up and do what we could think, right? But it did. And the regulations can't always keep up. But that fundamentally said that anything at the time, I think when we had the discussions, it was 1.2 kilos was the mathematics that were put up on the screen when we had the conversation. And then it was decided that by the time we put in a couple of a few caveats, like in the flight test world,
yes.
on the full size side of things,
Indeed.
like, you know, I know how fast I can fly a certain aircraft, I know how fast it will go, but if we go that fast every time with it, or allow the pilots to fly it that quickly every time, it will shake itself to bits whilst someone's in it at an unexpected point. So we set VNE as the never exceed speed because it's within certain multiplication factors of the damage that we get to, right? And it was the same in the JARIS conversation and all that sort of stuff. So it was 900 grams at the time. I was like, well, if it's under 900 grams, it's not going to kill someone. Brilliant. And actually that's where it sat, you know, 400 feet, blah, blah, blah.
It stayed there.
The kinetic energy, and that was properly done with the elasticity of a human head or not, and all that sort of stuff, and the probability of death, and that was worked out, right? But it's like, oh God, no, now we've got to regulate this again because now everything's under 900 grams and blah blah blah, and I get it, you've got to change with that, but it doesn't fundamentally change the outcome of an accident or an incident.
That's right.
Like
that's right. Exactly.
The severity remains the same. Yes, the probability's increased, but the severity remains the same. So that's why I'm saying in that kind of car crash thing that Adam was on about, I don't disagree, right? We can't do this what ifs. At some point, it's aviation. It isn't intrinsically safe. Like stepping out the front door isn't intrinsically safe. Like lying in your bed until you're 80 all day every day.
I think that's what annoyed me a little bit with the talk of we have to regulate for the guy who opens the drone from an Argos, etc., and that kind of thought process. And then, of course, the highly restrictive VLOS within the ANC, the VLOS guide, because you're bringing everyone down to it. And I said to Callum in those interviews, why don't you have an AMC that is for beginners? And actually, then you're going to get more beginners picking that up, and they're going, oh, okay, that's for me. and say, okay,
Drone
this is what
code.
we think you should do if you've got less than 30 hours flying
Yeah.
experience, and aim it at those people. And then very much like we've got the different categories and the different subcategories within the open, you know, so that you can do more and more as you become more qualified and as you become more experienced. Why not do that? And I think we need that marrying up of that we don't have here in the uncrewed side of things at the moment, that we do have in other parts of aviation, of experience and of knowledge counting for something. And then actually the more hours you have on something, the more certified you become on something, etc., the more allowances you do get, etc. I think we need to start seeing that. Just very quickly, thank you, Metro Drones, for the $20 super chat. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you to all of our US viewers as well who are coming in, and thank you to all of our awesome channel members who've joined us as well, including Gospel Aerial Photograph, who's now become a new member of the Drone Club.
Whoop, whoop.
So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Legend.
Indeed. I appreciate that greatly. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate you all coming along today. Now, I do want to talk about something. You're not very good at talking about yourself, and you're you need to. I would like to talk about the Drone Mentor for a few minutes, if you don't mind, because it's something which I think is very exciting. I think people want to know, because this is you moving away from the regulatory side of things and moving more towards the how to build your drone business and that type of thing, with obviously the huge amount of experience that you have in that from not just people will know you from UAVHUB, but they might not know the fact that you have flown all over the world. And what was the name of your commercial operation again? I forget it now.
Aerial motion pictures.
It feels so long time ago since we saw that logo. But you know, flew all over the world in you know, some very complex and cutting edge commercial operations, etc. And you're now passing that experience on as a mentor to people wanting to take those steps, aren't you?
Yeah, trying to. Yeah, and it's nice to actually see, like I say, a few of the guys in here tonight who are in our top tier kind of mentoring program, which is brilliant, that we've just launched. So, yeah, this is like I say, I am moving away from the regulated space, and moving away from it, because I think there's way more to this incredible industry than us kind of worrying about and concerning ourselves all the time with the rules and regulations, right? Like, they're there, we need to know them, that's great, but actually if you want to be successful in the drone world, and actually if you just want to come and enjoy it, right, you can operate and enjoy it in the open category, or get your A2 in the UK, or your Part 107 in America, and your basic or advanced in Canada, whatever it might be, to allow you to do more, right? And you don't always need to be pushing the limits. You don't always need to be trying to operate in complex and congested places,
pushing
just to be able to enjoy flying your drone.
No,
right?
exactly.
So we're trying to do two things, and this has always been my MO, right, since the Mr. MPW days. And I think this is why it hurts when people, and the similarly for yourself, right, when people say, oh, you're the man from the CAA and all this sort of stuff, and they start trolling you for that. And it's like, no, you're doing what you do because you care about it and you genuinely want to help people, and you want to help people understand the craziness that unfortunately we need to understand, and it's complex and difficult. And for me, it was the same with the Mr. MPW thing, but that's why I stopped, because we were getting death threats because people thought I was the man from the CAA and I was helping them bring in these new regulations. It's madness, absolute madness.
Crazy.
Like, we're just guys on YouTube trying to help people. Like, you think I want to be sat here at, what is it now, 8:15 on a Friday night talking about regulations? I mean, I do, because it's with a mate on YouTube, right? And people are listening, and it's nice to have a bitch and a moan sometimes. But
I have the man with a gun step away from you now. Yeah, you can. Yeah, the guy with the gun can. Yeah, thank you. Send the order.
That's it. And just we lost the drone mentor. And it's really frustrating. So I think we need to get back to enjoying it. And part of that is building a community and all helping each other. There's too much bitching and moaning in Facebook groups. There's too much misinformation in Facebook groups.
Oh, yes.
And people who don't know what they're on about, but they're often the ones who have the loudest voices, it seems. And that's crazy, right? So to try and remove that misinformation and get people to join together in the thing that we love and the thing that we care about and the thing we're passionate about. Like, there's a reason we're all here listening to this tonight, guys, and it isn't because we want to bitch and moan about the regulations, right? It's because we all love drones, or we all love getting a camera in the air, or we all love the thought of making some money from doing something we enjoy. And that's what this is about. So we're building a community. We've got over 1,000 people already inside a Facebook group. We have and there's loads of free resources. So the primary thing is we're building a community, and this is kind of the exclusive part of what we've, and this wasn't intended, right? Like, this wasn't what we came on to talk about tonight. I set this up today, and this is where we're taking it now. So we've done it on Facebook traditionally. I today have set up, and we're launching the an internal community, so it's hosted on our own site.
Awesome.
By the company that we use, Kajabi, to do all of our training now, and we loaded on our Drone Mentor Academy students and my Drone Business Secret students. They're the kind of different levels within the training at the moment, so that people could come in and we can all learn from each other and we can all help each other. And it's amazing seeing those connections and the relationships and the networking and the help that people are already doing, thinking of business names and way to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, any idea where I can go and get show reel stuff, or where can I go and find editing stuff, or where can I go and get this? And that's what it's all about. So the fundamentals are building a community. Exactly. And helping each other.
And I like the fact that it is stepping away from the focus on regulation, and actually it is talking about building, as you say, building community, building their businesses. And XJ did make one of his funny comments of, here comes the sponsored segment. In actual fact, I put this in the show tonight. We're not an affiliate of the Drone Mentor. Matt is just a very good friend. I believe in what he's doing here. In actual fact, Geeksvana is a sponsor-free zone. We do not, as a channel, we do not accept or want or have any financial gain from any sponsors. The only financial gain I might get from Matt is a flight in a plane one day, or a pint down the local. Basically, is probably about as much as that sponsorship will extend to. But yeah, it is an exciting thing, and I think it's something which I think is very different. I think you're uniquely placed to do it. Now, there is a link in the description to go and have a look at it. There's free, as usual with Matt, there's free downloads and free access to things and all sorts of different ways of getting in there. And as he said, he was with some of his higher echelon members today, really getting into the real nitty gritty of things in terms of providing advice and support and mentorship there as well. So frankly, if I was pushing that side of things forward more than I am at the moment, you'd be the guy that I would turn to. So I'm more than happy for us to link you in the description for that 100%. So
thank you. So come and join the community. Come and say hello.
Yes.
But read the rules, right? It's about being kind. It's about being helpful, and it's about looking after each other. And we don't talk about regulations. We don't talk. It is implicitly in there. And people who come in and ask and talk about stuff like that, we tell them that isn't what we do here, and we remove those posts, because that isn't what it's about. It's about learning more about the thing that we love doing.
Exactly.
So it's a lovely thing to do. But and then of course there are paid things on the back end. That,
we have to make money as well.
I mean, I can pay for it, right?
Yeah,
so,
it isn't a dirty word, frankly. I don't think it's people making money from their skills, which is exactly what you're helping people to do as well, of course. So excellent. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, Matt. I really do appreciate it. It's one of those things where I always, as you know, I prepare diligently for these live streams and have a nice long run order of things to talk about and that type of thing. And I always find it's much more of a conversation with you, and it's much more of a passion project, and I find myself getting more animated as well and things. So I really do appreciate you coming along and joining us, and I'd like to see a lot more of you on the channel in the future. Wink, wink.
Yeah, no, it'd be good. It'd be nice. Exactly.
As I say, thank you everybody for joining us. We've had a really consistent audience of just over 200 for most of the evening. I really appreciate that. It shows those that need to be shown that we are a community capable of engaging in a healthy way, capable of knowing actually what is right, what is wrong, what is safe, and that we want to have those conversations with the airspace regulator and government. So I think it's a good thing from that point of view as well. It shows that on a Friday night there's still a good amount of people wanting to come out and listen and get their views across. So I won't steal your blue sky thing, but thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Geeksvana Live. Thank you, Matt.
See you later, guys.
Go on, blue skies, come on.
All right. Yeah, stay safe, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Until then, fly safe and blue skies.
Woohoo!